Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahabushai, Bahasham, Brakahakudash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahabushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off with an article from RT.com titled, U.S. says Israel free to act against Iran. The U.S. envoy to Israel said Tel Aviv would not be tied by any nuclear deal with Iran. Washington's ambassador to Israel has said that a renewed nuclear pact with Iran will not bar the close U.S. ally from taking action to protect itself. So with that statement alone, that pretty much just goes to show you that the Iran nuclear deal in the bigger scheme of things is just worthless to the United States of America and the state of Israel. Israel's going to do whatever they want, and the United States of America, which is nothing more than a lapdog for the state of Israel, is going to follow behind them. Just look what happened during President Trump's term in office. It was Benjamin Netanyahu that got Trump to get the U.S. out of the Iranian nuclear deal back then. As negotiators attempt to revive the 2015 JCPOA agreement between Tehran and world powers, speaking to Israel's Channel 12 on Thursday, Ambassador Tom Nides outlined that the United States does not expect Tel Aviv to sit quietly and not do anything should a final deal be struck with Iran. We've been very clear about this. If we have a deal, the Israelis' hands are not tied. If we don't have a deal, the Israelis' hands are certainly not tied, the envoy said, adding that whether or not an agreement is reached, Israel can do and take whatever actions they need to take to protect the state of Israel. While Nides argued that President Joe Biden is doing whatever he can to make sure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon using a diplomatic channel, he appeared to give tacit approval for Israeli military action against the Islamic Republic, even with an agreement in place to restrain its atomic program. Now we jump down to this little paragraph. At the press conference, America's top diplomat declared there is no daylight between the U.S. and Israel's stance on the nuclear-armed Iran, vowing that deal or no deal, the two sides would continue to work together to counter Iran's destabilizing behavior in the region. And like I just said, the United States of America is nothing more than a lapdog for the state of Israel. Best believe that all these countries in the Middle East that the U.S. has knocked over their government or attempted to knock over their government, the state of Israel had a big part in getting the U.S. to do so that the Middle East could be balkanized, and the only strong nation in the Middle East would be the state of Israel. Just remember the Oded Yinon plan. But ultimately, this is biblical prophecy taking place before your very eyes, because in the scriptures it states that the least of the flock shall draw out all these nations into the bigger battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat in that Middle Eastern region. This is Jeremiah 49 verse 20. Therefore, hear the counsel of Yahweh that he had taken against Edom. And the biblical Edomites are known today as the so-called white people, the so-called Caucasians. These Americans, Europeans, Australians, Russians, and even those Israelis over in the Holy Land right now, they're not the true people of the book. They're Edomites of the tribe of Amalek. And for the rest of the video, I'll be referring to them as the 1948ers. And his purposes that he had purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. And that least of the flock is talking about those Amalekite Edomites, the 1948ers. And they're going to do something to trigger a war with Iran, which is going to draw them out. Draw out the United States of America and other NATO nations in on their side against Iran. And on the side of Iran, it's going to draw out nations like Russia and China, which again is altogether going to play into the bigger battle in the valley of Jehoshaphat in that Middle Eastern region, the War of Armageddon. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. And as we saw from that article, the U.S. stated that no matter how the Iranian nuclear deal plays out, that the state of Israel can take any action they want against Iran. And also, at the press conference, America's top diplomat declared there is no daylight between the U.S. and Israel's stance on a nuclear-armed Iran, vowing that deal or no deal, the two sides would continue to work together to counter Iran's destabilizing behavior in the region. The least of the flock shall draw them out. Now let's get into some more precepts to further show how the least of the flock is going to draw these nations down into the valley of Jehoshaphat for the war of Armageddon. This is Joel chapter 2, verse 20. But I will remove far off from you the northern army, the North American army, the United States military, all branches, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, etc., etc., and will drive him into a land barren and desolate, the Middle East, more specifically Saudi Arabia, which is going to be the main staging ground for this battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, with his face toward the East Sea. And when we go to a map of the Middle East, we have Saudi Arabia right here. And before a lot of wars that the U.S. conducted in the Middle East, they used Saudi Arabia as a staging ground. And what's to the east of Saudi Arabia? The Persian Gulf, and above it, Iran, the main target of the state of Israel and the U.S. in the Middle East. And to the northeast, you've got Iraq, which has the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in it, and the U.S. also has a military presence in Iraq. And his hinder part, or behind him toward the utmost sea, the Red Sea. And what do you have up here? The land of Israel. And his stink shall come up, and his ill savor shall come up, because he had done great things. There's going to be a great slaughter of U.S. military personnel in that Valley of Jehoshaphat when this battle kicks off. And also, like I've been saying throughout the video, not only is the U.S., NATO, and other nations going to get driven out into this war on the side of Israel against Iran, but on the side of Iran, nations like Russia and China are going to get drawn out on their side, and that's also a part of biblical prophecy. This is Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm going to start at verse 1. And the word of Yahweh came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, which is the biblical name for Russia, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And those hooks being put into the jaws of Gog or Russia is the Most High putting that old Soviet Union spirit back on these Russians, which we can clearly see with Russia's military operation in Ukraine right now. And I will bring thee forth. Again, the least of the flock shall draw them out, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company, with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Russia's military hardware being gathered down into that Middle Eastern region. Soldiers, tanks, fighter jets, helicopters, artillery pieces, etc., etc. And Russia already has a military presence in the Middle East due to them helping Bashar al-Assad during the Syrian civil war. Persia, which is the ancient name for Iran, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them handling shield and helmet. Gomer, which is speaking of Turkey and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them, be a protector unto nations like Persia or Iran, when the least of the flock draws out the United States of America and other NATO nations in on the side of Israel to go against Iran. But now I'm going to close it out in Joel chapter 3, verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, which is exactly what the true men of the Lord, the prophets of the Most High, chiefly through GMS or Great Millstone, are doing by going out onto the highways and byways to preach this word, as well as putting up video epistles like this, proclaiming among the heathen Gentiles to prepare for war, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, war with Iran, the War of Armageddon, World War III, the Northern Army being driven down into a land barren and desolate. Wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen. You Edomites, or so-called white people, the Ishmaelites, who are the so-called Arabs, the Moabites, or the so-called Chinese, the Elamites, or the so-called East Indians, etc., etc., and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, and those mighty ones are the death angels holding back this great destruction, waiting to get the go-ahead to release it, which is mainly going to happen after the Charagma, the MOTB, in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18, the RFID/NFC, MICROCHIPIMPLANT is mandatorily implemented. Let the heathen be wakened, the state of Israel, the United States of America, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Russia, China, these other Arab nations, these NATO nations, and come up to the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which in the Hebrew is Yahweh's Shaphat, or Yahweh's judgment. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. And when you go up to the first couple of verses in this chapter, you'll see why the Most High is gathering these nations down into the Valley of Jehoshaphat to punish and judge them for afflicting the apple of his eye, the true children of Israel, who are known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. And at the top of that list are you Edomites, as pursuant to Psalms chapter 83. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. And as we saw from that article on RT, the day of Yahweh is very near in the valley of decision. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong, as we can clearly see we're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharallah, and until next time, Shalom.